So you bought your first chuck. You've been turning a while, now you're thinking about buying a second chuck, or perhaps a third chuck. Is this a smart move, or is it really tool lust? Well, I'm not here to talk you into buying more tools, but if you're at that decision point, I want to give you some information that might help you make a wise decision. So I guess the major issue is, why do you want an additional chuck? Are you having to change chuck jaws frequently, and is that interruption causing you a problem? Do you turn different projects back to back that require different jaws? Do you want a dedicated chuck for a specific task that you do fairly regularly?
Perhaps you upgraded your lathe from a mini lathe to more of a full-size lathe with a larger spindle. Perhaps you kept your smaller lathe, but using that one chuck on two lathes gets to be a hassle, because whether it's you got an M33 or a 1 1/4, you got to use a spindle adapter, which can be an aggravation. You may have to modify the spindle adapter to fit your chuck for the first time. It extends the chuck further off and your work, which increases the possibility of run out. You may have to use a wrench to get it on and off. If you leave it attached, it still can be an aggravation.
Perhaps you're seeing other folks with multiple jaws, and you're concerned that you might be missing out. So, do you have a concern about fear of missing out? I would suggest there are three factors that really drive that decision on whether or not you need a bigger chuck. Number one is, how wide a variety of projects do you regularly turn? I do that collaboration with Sam and Richard and Tommy every month. We turn a wide variety of projects. But are you primarily interested in turning really big things like this bowl regularly? If you haven't turned a big bowl, don't get a new chuck, just turn a big bowl. Borrow one or go visit somebody and get out of your system. But generally, most folks not interested in big bowls like this. The other consideration, I think, is how often do you turn? I turn quite a bit. But if you turn a whole lot, maybe it's not as big a consideration. And of course, the third consideration is, what's your budget? The standard jaws that come with a typical chuck are great for a wide variety of projects, up to maybe an 8 to 10 inch bowl. This is approaching 10 inches. You get larger than that, you start pushing it a little bit. Works well for those size bowls, boxes up to medium to large size boxes, works just fine. Now when you start getting down to smaller projects, I'll take boxes for an example. It could be ornaments or any number of things. You start needing smaller jaws, and I just love being able to reach for my small mini chuck when that's the appropriate size, rather than have to change out jaw sets. It's just real efficient for me. And that's for projects of maybe more like this size, where project for your more like this size work just fine with your typical standard chuck jaws. And before I got my micro chuck, I just used a smaller set of jaws on my larger chuck. These are basically essentially the same size. This is just so much more convenient for me to grab this as a second chuck without having to change the jaws. So how long does it actually take to swap out jaws? Well, let's time it. It's 4 times fast forward. And this is based on not having to stop and clean the screws or clean out any of the mounting on the back of the chuck, just swapping them out. And I'm going fairly fast, nothing really slowing me down. And it's going to take a few minutes. But depending on how often you do this, it may take longer to clean out the screws to prevent them from sticking, get rid of any dust. Maybe putting some anti-stick lubricant on it. And it can take a while, but sometimes it's good to take a break, sit down, and rest for a few minutes while you change this out. But it depends on how many times you have to do this a day, whether it's really an annoyance. So it took a little over 3.5 minutes. Okay, I
replaced the jaws again and restarted the timer, and the total was 6 minutes and 40 seconds with both set changes.
So is the time you save changing out the jaws worth the effort or worth the expense? Well, if you're a hobbyist and you're in it for the fun, you don't turn all that off, and maybe not. If you're a production turner and time is money, then it can certainly make a difference on your productivity not to have to swap out jaws, but just grabbing another chuck with a jaw that fits. So even for a hobbyist, though, if the changing the jaws out interrupts your flow and you've got to do it multiple times during the day, maybe it's a hassle, and it might be worth considering another set of another chuck. The tenon on your chuck, a conservative estimate, ought to be about 1/3 the size of your bowl. So that means for your standard jaws, where the tenon is generally less than 2 inches, the recess might be a little bit more than 2 inches. Anything up to 8 inches should not be too big a challenge to turn. You could push it and go a little further, but 8-inch bowl is probably pretty typical of the size bowl that I would make, because it's reasonable to harvest wood without breaking your back, and I'm not getting any younger. Bowls this big, there's not for me, I haven't seen a demand for them, and just processing lumber that large tends to be a bit of a strain. Now, this is a 16-inch bowl. The tenon is about 4 inches. I made it for this large set of jaws on this very large chuck. Might have been better off using a larger set of jaws. Might have been a little bit better, but this works just fine. Now, if you've got a smaller chuck, say something like the Nova G3 or the Record Power SC3 or the smaller Rikon chuck, just simply putting larger jaws on it may not be enough if you're going to turn really large things. Maybe you actually need not only larger jaws, but a larger chuck like this Nova Titan, or it might be a Stronghold, or it might be a Vigmark VM 120, but something closer to 5 inches rather than the smaller chuck below 4 inches with a larger set of jaws. If you turn a lot of bowls, maybe not necessarily this big, but maybe somewhere 8, 10, 12 inches, perhaps a larger set of bowl jaws that are wide to give a really strong hold might be a consideration. Also, if you're making urns or larger hollow forms, a set of jaws that will hold them like this might be a consideration, because you got to keep in mind not only is it your diameter, but it's also how long it is. How far does it project out from your chuck because of the leverage. Leverage can really do you a job, so you want to make sure you're set up appropriately. Perhaps you turn enough bowls that a set of cold jaws on a dedicated chuck will save you a lot of time in removing the tenon or cleaning up the bottom. But keep in mind that second chuck should solve a problem and not cause problems. Let me give you an example. If you're using the smaller set of cold jaws, it'll only accommodate about an 8-inch bowl, and they'll work just fine on an SC3 or a G3 chuck with a key like this, because it will clear it. But if you try to use the same set of jaws on the larger set of cold jaws, these jaws are going to be a hassle because they won't clear it, so you can only get like a quarter of a turn to make those adjustments. Now, if you're using a little bit larger chuck, like a SC4 or Supernova Nova 2, it has a larger chuck key, and the chuck is a little bit larger, so it will work fine on these larger set of jaws and clear it. If you turn a lot of small things like I do, whether it's birdhouse ornaments, miniature birds, the perch, flowers, various style Christmas tree ornaments, the little stalks for fruit, the nose, the hands for gonks,
you need a smaller set of jaws. And changing out the jaws would get pretty tedious on those kinds of projects for me. So these kind of jaws, spigot jaws or pin jaws, don't require super large chuck, standard, or even a little bit on a smaller scale like this precision bitty. You can either put in squares or rounds. The squares, unless you got it milled or cut perfectly square, it's not always going to fit tightly in there. So I tend to turn rounds between centers. What I find even preferable to this most of the time when I'm doing rounds is the collet chuck. Now the collet chuck I just find so much easier to use, and frankly it's a collet chuck with all of these extra jaws costs less than one of these other sets of one of these other chucks and a smaller set of jaws. Now, I was looking around on Amazon not long ago and I ran across this set of 13 ER32 collets that'll fit my chuck. And the beauty is, these 13, none of them overlap the 5 that came with my chuck. And they vary in sizes in gradations of generally about a 32nd of an inch. Now, here's the beauty of that. A moment ago, we showed you where we put this 1/2 inch dowel in here, and it worked just great. Now I picked up another 1/2 inch dowel, at least I thought it was a 1/2 inch dowel, and guess what? It doesn't fit. So how do I solve that? The reason I bought these is because I just look around and find one that'll fit, and I don't have to worry about so much about sizing that dowel or tenon as much as I do about finding one that'll just fit. Another handy feature of the collet chuck is it's a great way to mount your sanding mandrel for finishing the bottom of bowls or small parts. The other thing I like about it is it's a great holder for my 3/8 inch cutter for using on my threading jig, and it's far superior to the cheap drawbar one that typically comes with the threading jig. If you want to see a complete review of the collet chuck, you can check out that link up here in the corner. And one more thing, if you buy the 1 1/4 model, which is what I would advise for anybody, even if you had a smaller lathe, it comes with a 1 inch adapter, so you can adapt this to a mini lathe, and you can see from the size it doesn't extend out very far. So just that part would probably cost you close to $20. So that's a nice feature of the 1 1/4 model. Alright, let's talk about the interchangeability of chuck jaws. Keep in mind that all chuck jaws don't fit all chucks. Even within the same manufacturer, jaws between different models may not be interchangeable. The one exception is in the Technitool, Sorby Patriot, the standard record power jaws, the fairly new Ricon. They all are interchangeable, and that makes it a lot easier swapping out jaws because there's a little more familiarity, and they are more likely to have the same screw size. Also, by getting them all from the same, generally from the same manufacturer, you're less likely to have a duplication. If you go out and buy a different chuck, you may wind up duplicating some, or a chuck system. Especially from the second tier where they bundle them, you're liable to wind up with some duplicates that you paid for. Now, some things to watch out for when you start accumulating different chucks. You, in all likelihood, are going to get a little more complicated life with your chuck keys. Here's an example of the various chuck keys that I have for my chucks. Even though in most instances the chuck jaws are interchangeable, except for the ones for my record power micro chuck, the SC2, that has a different chuck key. But there's also a different chuck key for the SC1. So different brands are generally going to have different kinds of chuck keys that may not be interchangeable, and that tends to be one more thing to have to kind of keep up with. Another thing to keep in mind is when you start adding chuck jaws, the screws can start making life a little more complicated. Every manufacturer not necessarily going to use the same type of screws, which means, as shown here, you're going to have different wrenches to swap out the jaws or take the jaws out for cleaning. In this case, I've got 3 different types of wrenches needed for the jaw sets, the chucks that I have. So maybe all you need is another set of jaws. And if you're adding another chuck for those jaws, certainly makes life a little easier, even though you have that initial cost up front. But one cost consideration is you don't have to buy a complete chuck set. Many manufacturers will just sell a companion chuck without jaws, so you don't have to buy duplicate chuck keys and standard jaws with it if you just buy the companion chuck. All right, let's talk about saving money. One way you can save money is buy a used chuck, and you can get those many number of places, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, your club, Craigslist, they even use such a thing, estate sales and so on. Some of the things you want to look out for is excessive rust. Make sure that it scrolls smoothly. Make sure that the jaws have not been severely damaged with someone cutting into them with having a catch and cutting them into with a gouge or a skew. Those are I would say are the main issues. Make sure that it's got the insert that's appropriate for your particular lathe, or if it has a replaceable insert, that it'd be cost effective to buy the appropriate insert to replace it. Make sure all the screws are included and none of them are stripped, so you'd have a real challenge getting the jaws off. I bought these 2 chucks used and been very happy with them. Both of them are Nova chucks. Oh, and one more thing, make sure it comes with the appropriate chuck key. Technitool has an older chuck, a Supernova, the predecessor for the Supernova 2, and it used a scroll chuck key, and that they no longer offer a replacement for that. So you don't want a chuck that without a key to make it work.
Whether you buy new or used, I suggest buying a quality chuck. Now, chuck brands, arguing about them a little bit like a religious war here in no particular order are my suggestions, and these are to be contrasted with what I call second-tier chucks.
Saving money with second-tier chucks. I'd call a second-tier or a value chuck. Brands like Win, Bauer, Grizzly, Barracuda, Vivor, and various no-name chucks off the internet or Amazon. Personally, from what I've seen and read on the forums, you get what you pay for, and do you want to save a few bucks on something that's going to go 1,000 RPMs close to your face? Maybe not. Now your experience may be different, and if so, please share it in the comments below. But that initial cost may be offset by the lack of quality. They can have less quality engineering, not as precision made. It may not scroll as well. It may be assembled improperly. You're going to have a harder time getting backup parts for it if you have some type of problem, maybe inconsistent jaw registration. So I would tend to avoid those. Now, it may be okay if it's your second chuck, and if you already got one, you're looking at upgrading, move the second tier chuck to a secondary purpose and have the newer chuck a little higher quality that is going to be your primary chuck. Another way to save money is a number of manufacturers of the quality chucks will sell just the companion chuck, just a chuck without the chuck key, without the standard jaws or any other accessories. So that's another way to save money, and also keep your chucks consistent of the same type. So let's review that decision checklist pretty quick. Are you constantly changing jaws? Do you turn different projects from one session to another, requiring different jaws on one project, such as Christmas tree ornaments? Can you stay within the same chuck system? Is getting a second chuck going to reduce frustration? And could a used or even a value chuck help solve your problems? More jaws don't necessarily make you a better turner, but it can make your turning more productive, more efficient, or perhaps just more enjoyable. If you like this video, you might want to check out the video I've got on buying your first chuck, or the video I've got on giving you more information about the various chuck jaws that are available. For those of you that have more than one chuck, I'd appreciate you sharing your advice in the comments below. I'm not real keen on second tier chucks such as a Win, a Bauer, or a Barracuda, but if you've got information based on your experience with those to share, please leave them in the comments below. And remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back, you hear?